Today, we're talking to Chris Hewish, president at Xsolla, about how Web3 tech is changing the video game industry. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
The topic we have for today, though, is Web3 and what it's doing to the gaming industry. And so I'm super excited to talk about that. You're deep into the Web3 world. What's going on right now?
So, as we know, Web3 has had a rocky road where there was a lot of hype a few years ago. There was a lot of investment that poured in, and people were really focused on trying to make that killer Web3 app or game or product, whatever it might be. But unfortunately, people were really kind of focused on the wrong thing. In my opinion, they were focused on more of the speculative nature, the sort of play to earn, make a quick buck kind of approach, and no real fun game actually emerged. There was Axie Infinity, which was close, but that kind of collapsed as it was really play to earn. It turned out to be a bit of a pyramid scheme for players. And, it's been a technology that initially people were really excited about and assumed that the technology itself could be stood up to kind of make its own market within the gaming, ecosystem, forgetting the fact that at the end of the day, whenever there's a new technology, it needs to be paired with just some really fun gameplay in a way that the technology makes the gameplay additive, not that the gameplay is subservient to the technology. So I think, the first round with Web3, they had that it was technology first, gameplay second, and that just didn't fly. And there was also quite a bit of friction. I understand that you're familiar with the space, so you well know more than probably better than I do, and many people that, setting up a wallet was really difficult. Trying to figure out how to buy and use crypto was not easy for the average person. So all of this, there was a lot of friction to get in, and then once you got in, it wasn't really all that fun. So that's where it's been. And where it is now, what we see happening is there has been a shift. We're kind of coming out of that first phase, and people now recognize like, hey, Web3 is this really cool technology that offers some really interesting capabilities when it comes to decentralized ownership, to DeFi, to new types of experiences within games and within marketing for games. So why don't we look at Web3 as a way to do some really cool things under the hood that's kind of bring it, instead of being front and center, bring it down below, focus on good gameplay, use Web3 to provide enhanced functionality, remove the friction, make it really easy to set up so that you don't even really realize you're using Web3. You're just getting cool new capabilities. And that's kind of directionally what we're seeing happening, which is in reinvigorating, I think, the potential for this market.
And a lot of people in the SaaS world, when they hear Web3, they have a certain number of things that pop up in their mind. But you're in the gaming world mostly. So how does Web3 express itself in the gaming world?
It is not NFTs.
Okay.
I mean, that was part of that initial, hype where, again, it was very speculative, and it was like, oh, we'll get these, NFTs that maybe don't really have any value, or there were technology-driven ideas that just did not really have a market fit or didn't align with the reality of the market. What do I mean by that? I mean things like, oh, you're going to get an item in one game and be able to have portability and take that item from, Fortnite over to League of Legends, right? And it's like, come on, Epic and Riot are not going to create an interoperable system, maybe someday, but not now. And the technology to make that happen easily, just really, other than the portability of the digital asset, the technology within the games themselves to be able to use assets from other games just isn't there. So, I think there were some promises, some big ideas that really didn't work. And what does it mean now for games is, like I said, starting to unlock capabilities that are under the hood that reinforce existing gameplay that's fun. For example, creator economies. You see on, for instance, Roblox, you have these creators that are making their own experiences, their own games, their own assets, and they're having great success on Roblox. Web3, if it were to be integrated, would allow them to take all of that and go to other platforms, or get royalties as those assets move between players and things like that. So that's some of what we see coming. And then on the marketing tech side, offers and digital rewards and things like that are pretty exciting as well.
So is the Web3 component of the Roblox creator economy the fact that they have a creator economy, or is it the potential portability?
So the fact that they have a creator economy affords the opportunity to introduce Web3 elements that could further enhance that already existing economy, right? Versus, hey, this is a Web3 company somewhere that's creating some product, and then they need to get a game that has a big user base that can take advantage of it. I think what we're seeing as the future is, let's look at existing user bases, existing game ecosystems that are doing cool things that could be further enhanced with the introduction of Web3 functionality, which players could engage with or not. They don't even really realize the difference. It's just a new function, our capability within the game that they're already playing. And that, I think, is where the real opportunity lies.
And you're doing a series on this, a 3-part series on your podcast. Is that right?
We are. So The Business of Games is the podcast. Thank you for the opportunity to give a shout out. And we do look at different topics, different things that are impacting the business of games. And we wanted to do an episode on Web3. And we started working on it. And one of the people on my team, he said to me, this sounds really amazing. It's interesting, but I don't know half of what you're talking about. Like, I don't even know what these words mean. And he said, it would be really great if you could do kind of a introduction or a 101 on Web3. And that led us to the point of saying, maybe we should do a series where we'll do the first episode kind of just explaining what the heck it is, because a lot of people don't know what is an NFT, a non-fungible token? What does that actually mean? And then do an episode about kind of what's currently happening, and then another one on what's coming.
And is that 3-part series already live?
The first episode just dropped this week, and then we'll be dropping the others over the next couple of months. And then we surround each episode with 1, 2, sometimes 3 individual long form interviews where we'll have guests that are on the main episode where we'll use their sound bites, but we'll record them separately in long form interviews, kind of conversations like you and I are doing right now. So it creates, for each quote unquote podcast episode, there's usually 3 pieces of content. The sort of the main part, which is kind of a 30-minute overview on the topic with sound bites from guests, and then 2 or 3 45-minute or so longer interviews with individuals who go deep.
Excellent. How can people find that again?
You can find that on any of your favorite podcast, spots like Spotify, Apple podcasts. We have a page on xsolla.com/podcast that also links out to it. And we're on LinkedIn as well. So The Business of Games is the name.
What is the cold start problem?
Oh, yeah. So the cold start problem is basically with Web3, and again, this is kind of what has happened, to date. Companies create these cool new pieces of functionality, these new products, but there's nobody to use it, right? They're trying to put them into, it's a product that's trying to find a market. And what we mean by the cold start problem is, if you create something really great and put it out there, that's the product side of it. But the go-to-market side of it is, how do you get mass adoption? And how do you kind of cold start that process of mass adoption? And that's been a problem that really hasn't been addressed yet on the Web3 side, because the Web3 products or the Web3 games have really been focused on a very, very small segment of users and there's not enough of a user base there to lead to a sustainable sort of self-propelling, market. And that's what we mean by the cold start problem. So we see that as another issue, sort of facing this sort of the revitalization or the return of Web3, where you have people figuring out new use cases, removing the friction, making it something that is actually beneficial to the average player. That's all great. That's the product piece. But how do you get all of that into the hands of millions of players, right? Not just 50,000 players or 100,000, but how do you get into millions of players' hands? And how do you encourage them to embrace it and use it for the first time and kind of cold start that whole ecosystem where, we believe that there is some very, very valuable functionality that does improve players' experiences and lives as well as developers. It's just getting people to use it that first few times to get it, self-sustaining.
And I'm assuming the way you do that is just magic.
we have some ideas. But I think whomever solves that is really going to be, somebody that helps to move that market forward in a meaningful way. And part of that shift is, as I mentioned, how do you shift from building something that has no market to building something that serves an existing market? Because it's much easier. You don't need to cold start really if there's already an ecosystem in place that you're plugging into versus you're building something and you have to build your own ecosystem. Then you have a real cold start problem. So I think
I learned that in startup world. So if you're trying to do something entirely new, there's not a budget line item for it. So you have to go through the effort of getting the company to actually carve out a budget for it. And that is incredibly difficult often, especially if you're only slightly better or slightly different. It's really hard to do that. That's why I've always liked, how do we eliminate line items from the budget, or how do you make something that's so much better that people love to such a degree that they're just like, switch and take my money,
Absolutely.
Objects between games is the example I think that you gave for the Web3 thing, right? Is there any other examples that you've seen have this cold start problem, or they've come out and they just didn't really take off? Or
well, I mean, you could almost say it about all of Web3 on the first time around.
The whole thing was a dumpster fire. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't the technology itself; it was just the implementation. And I think because it was focused on these ideas that like portability of items between games from different companies. It's great in theory, Ready Player One, awesome. The reality though is that it's just not, the market isn't there in the sense that, companies are not incentivized to do that. The technology isn't there to, automatically make an asset from one game work in another game, whatever it may be. So, I think that certainly was something that didn't work. The idea of NFTs as just speculative investments versus, if you make a unique item in a game that's portable, it still needs to be fun and it still needs to be meaningful to the player. I think that was kind of a miss a lot of times the first time around. And then just the economies. There were no real guardrails around them. There were no regulations in place to protect players. So you got things like rug pulls and, you got these unregulated markets that ended up being pyramid schemes or kind of collapsed once the limited user base, was exhausted. So those were things that didn't work before, even though the underlying concepts, have some, I think are interesting. And if, having unique items that you own is pretty cool, when you can then, potentially trade or sell them however you want on regulated marketplaces, so that things are safe. That's pretty interesting. And we know that already is of interest to players when you look at games like CSGO, where people are selling skins, there, but, not necessarily in a way that all games could emulate, because not everybody's going to build their own marketplace and manage it, much less enforce, fairness within it. So I think that's, a big thing. And just the more and more that user-generated content continues to take off and become a bigger part of games, even Battlefield 6 now has a UGC mode in it. And, this really is a key component of games going forward. It's not just limited to Roblox and, Fortnite and whatnot, but more and more games are embracing UGC. So, Web3 has a lot of opportunity there to, basically ensure creators get, royalties for things that they create as they move throughout the ecosystem of a game. So I think that's all pretty interesting. And and there's much more, but I'll pause there.
So I'm from the outside, right? Because I was a gamer until I had kids, and now I play Sims essentially with children. But I got to see, the past 20, 30 years of it. And the biggest changes for me were online gaming that made everything different. And then from there, I guess the other two that I saw that were huge impacts to, like, when I saw them, I say, oh my gosh, like, this is crazy. The cross-platform gaming, the fact that I could be on an Xbox or a PC or whatever it was, that was really interesting to me. And then the last one was watching my kids ask me, hey, can I have $5 a month to join this guy's Minecraft server because he built this special game inside him? And I'm like, I told him no, of course. But I'm sure you love that. But that was it was interesting. It was like really kind of cool because I told him, I said, what you can do is you can become a creator, you can make your own stuff, and you can use any of the money from your creations to buy other creations. But I'm not giving you money to buy creations. And so that's what they're working on right now.
Perfect. Exactly. Yeah. And that's, and that's a great example of a way that Web3 or blockchain, right, could enhance and create more opportunity around what they're doing. So, right now when you're doing that and you create the Minecraft server and you do everything, it kind of lives within Minecraft. There's a whole gray area of secondary markets where, people are buying and selling assets and doing all kinds of things that they've built for Minecraft outside of the main rules, right, of the game. So you could get banned, you could get scammed, any number of things. With Web3, smart contracts and blockchain ledger and all of that and crypto, it becomes much safer. And then with some of the regulations that are pending out there, you could suddenly have safe secondary markets where people can go and thrive, right, as creators and then ensure that whatever they create, they're continuing to get, paid for and proper attribution sort of as it goes from player to player.
So, and then I kind of want to sum all this up, this whole section up. But before I do, just one piece of clarification: was the user-generated content considered Web3?
No, user-generated content was not. So that was Web 2, just on a traditional database, right? Is where a lot of that is.
So if my wife asked me, which she won't, after the interview, hey, what's Web3 all about? My current situation, which we may need to modify after I share it with you, my current understanding is it was this cluster of new technologies that mostly failed, but were really interesting to watch fail.
Yes.
Is that right?
I would say that I would modify it slightly.
Okay.
The technology did not fail. The use cases, the go-to-market implementation of
so
that
the technologies came out and were interesting.
Yeah.
And what were the technical, like the actual pieces of it? Is that the concept of NFTs and the concept of blockchain, like these things?
Yeah, it was the way that they were used and implemented.
Okay.
And they were implemented in ways that were either not realistic, right? They just were not adopted, or they were implemented in a way that was speculative and focused on making money versus how could this technology enhance what you're doing. So it just created it was just a bad use case and implementation case across the board. Whereas, people weren't really thinking about, I have a fun game already. How can Web3 enhance my players' enjoyment and the value they get from my game? And I think that's the paradigm shift that we're seeing now, where it's like, okay, wait a minute. Blockchain is a really cool technology. Web3, all of that, which is just basically meaning that, things are decentralized and people can, have digital assets that they own versus the company that they acquired those assets from still owning them. And then that opens up the door for things you could do. Yeah.
I'm tracking. Web3, great set of technologies, but the way they all got applied to gaming and the explosion of Web3 didn't quite work out.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. Hey, I think we did it. I have achieved an understanding.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I feel good about it because I was trying to, they kind of got blurred for me for a minute and I was trying to really pick them apart. Now let's talk a little bit about the crypto legislation right now. There's the Clarity Act making its way through Congress. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I actually went up to DC during Crypto Week a few months ago and sat in on the Senate Finance Committee hearing where they talked about it and went kind of on the policy walk side of things. So that was interesting. But yes, definitely familiar with it.
Were you able to stay awake?
It was tough. Oh boy, those senators, they can talk. Oh my goodness. When, they're making their statements to get on the record. And it was, this is a sidebar, but it was very interesting to see the process where I went into this finance committee hearing, which was, ostensibly it was to discuss the Clarity Act, the bill, the language of it, and sort of get into the technicalities before that would be voted on and then presented to the full Senate for consideration. And what ended up happening is each senator kind of had a position that they kind of wanted to speak to. And it was very much almost like campaign trail stuff where they weren't really talking very much about the substance of the bill. Some of them did, but a lot of them were using it as a platform to bash the other party. And it was our government in action, man. It was something. But it ended up getting through. So
it did. Did what you want to happen go through?
It passed the Finance Committee. So the Clarity Act itself, just to back up, is a bipartisan House bill that was passed in July. And it's designed to provide a clear regulatory framework for digital assets. And basically, it'll help regulators understand what to do in the world of crypto. It'll help investors understand what they can invest in safely, what they can't. It'll help developers and players understand how to use crypto and Web3 in ways that are compliant. And what I mean by that is, without treading into the world of getting into securities and, speculative kind of financial models where you need to be licensed to do that. And a lot of Web3 is not that. And we need these regulations to identify like, hey, a digital asset in a game is very much different than a stock, right? For a company. So if you're selling a stock, you need to be licensed. And if you're selling just a digital asset, a sword in a game, well, you don't need to be licensed for that, right? So it's this kind of ambiguity, which is also tripped up that first implementation a little bit. And some companies were fined. There were, people got kind of smacked down by the SEC. Was it the SEC or the FTC?
All of them.
Yeah. So it's passed the House. It was voted on the floor, and it's over in the Senate. It passed their Senate Finance Committee or Banking Committee, and it's up for a vote on the Senate floor, which at one point, everyone thought that would happen in December. But with the government shut down and some last minute stuff behind the scenes, because it was bipartisan, but there's, I believe, 13, the Republican Party fully supports it. There were 13 Democratic senators that supported it, but they just want to ensure that once it gets passed, that when the rules get translated from, these regulations to actually written out that it's a bipartisan group that does that. So there's still some wrangling that's going on there. So it may push into Q1 of next year. But the understanding is once it passes the Senate, it'll get signed immediately into law by the president.
That is wonderful. I mean, this is something that I'm not necessarily surprised that it affects you, but it was something we've been looking at for a long time because we own the Bitcoin mines, and the banks are all really finicky about, like, we want to scale up the mines, and you need like lots of capital to do it. And if we were building a 20-story building, that's completely standard, normal thing. The bank's like, good, your math checks out. You have the industry expertise. You've got the collateral. Here you go. Not the case with a Bitcoin mine. The banks are like scared. They're like, we would love to, like, the math looks great and this looks like a good idea, but we can't do it because we're just not sure. Or the ones that have programs that are backed by the SBA or the USDA or the energy, even the green energy credits, because we're like reducing ethane from being burned and instead putting it to work. All those institutions are still like, hey, we're waiting on this thing to pass.
Yeah, you hit the head on the nail. That is a great example of how the lack of clarity around how to work with cryptocurrencies and blockchain and all of that from a regulatory standpoint impacts the business side of things. And what we've seen in games, and perhaps this is the case with mining as well, is investors are still investing. It's just going offshore, and it's going to places that do have regulations that are clear and create a safe environment to be able to work in. And or if it's not going offshore, there's offshore money that's not coming here. It's going somewhere else to build up this, to build businesses. So that's a big hit just on jobs and investment and innovation here, within the U.S. that we're missing out on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, get back to work, guys.
Exactly.
Their jobs are so easy.
Yes, they're
so easy.
So easy. And I need another excuse to wear a suit in front of the Capitol building and take a selfie and post it. So,
but congratulations on staying awake.
Yes.
That's like, those things are dry. I could just see you like post interview, like wearing a Red Bull sweater, be like, we did it, thanks to Red Bull. We stayed awake through the entire finance committee sub-meeting.
It was supposed to be like 2 hours, and I think it ended up being close to 6. It was just
wow.
And they took a break in between. It was just I was like, wow, you guys are just trying to get your sound bites and get your stuff on the record, and not there was not much roll up your sleeves and let's figure this out, which was it's the process, right?
Well, it is the process now. And speaking of which, oddly enough, this technology could be the backbone technology that allows us to move from an elected representative type of democracy to, like a direct. I'm not saying if that's good or bad. I'm saying that the technology would be there. Like it used to be, we would elect these people because it was wagon days and we weren't going all the way up there and we needed someone to represent all of our interests in the town. Now we all have these devices in our hand where we can represent our interest. And it's like, maybe there's a better, I'm not advocating for a specific system. I'm saying maybe there's a better system than what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the whole idea of the House of Representatives, right? You have the Senate, which is a smaller group, but the House of Representatives is supposed to be the people, right? And to your point, all the people were not able to participate in real time. Now we are, and having blockchain and having your vote or position on the ledger, or even gathering, consensus from constituents. If people have it, you're voting with a digital, unique digital token that's your vote. That there's so much,
absolutely,
right? There's so much that could come into play there, and then having history and provenance around that as well to kind of this is where it gets interesting from a when you start to talk about user acquisition and marketing. The fact that people's digital identities can have, history to them now that, you don't have to guess about what somebody's interests are. You can just see that from their, their digital profile. If you go that, if we, go that far, because you could see a ledger-based history of, what they've engaged with or not. And that's a whole ad tech side of it.
Dude, the data the ad tech companies have on you is wild. It is so much more than you think.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yes.
It is. And you can't get access to that. Whereas, with, getting into a Web3 environment, technically you could have your own digital, profile that has everything, and you would have all of that information as well, at least. But that's starting to get out there into next gen land. Yeah,
it is. There's a good interview I did a few years ago with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, creator of the World Wide Web, where he described what the future looks like, and it was very similar to what you just said. So you're tracking. Let's talk about the Google Play Store. The government is bringing the hammer down on them. They're going to open it up. I think, that's tomorrow, isn't it? The 22nd.
It was supposed to be tomorrow, but last minute.
Did Google shut down the government to avoid this?
There have been some, they're AWS outages, so they're not necessarily Google, but you never know what's going on. But here on the East Coast, we've had some outages yesterday, but no.
We did.
There was a judge that granted, I believe yesterday, they granted Google a 1-week extension to comply. So the new deadline is October 29th. And these were changes that were mandated by a court ruling in the Epic versus Apple case. And it's meant to allow developers to be able to finally bypass Google Play billing, set their own prices, enable alternative app stores, steer users outside of the apps. What that means is the ability to tell a user of your app that they could go to your website to get a better offer, a lower price, a bundle, something unique that they can't get in the app even. So really opening up, the full app ecosystem, similar to what has happened to a lesser degree, because the case was ruled on differently, but with Apple, with Google, it was opened up much more to get into the alternative billing and everything as well. But they've been granted this 1-week extension, which happens to coincide with Google had appealed to, or had not appealed, they had reached out to the Supreme Court. They had petitioned the Supreme Court for an emergency hearing, which was denied. That was a few weeks ago. But the Supreme Court gave them until October 27th to appeal that denial. So now they have time to appeal their denial. And we'll see where this goes. But
so it's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
What about Apple? Did they make the same thing with the Apple billing? Because it gets pretty crazy with the way they run their in-app purchases.
Oh my goodness, it does. So Apple was a little different, where they only lost here in the US. They only lost on the anti-steering part of it, and that meant that they have to allow app developers to let players or users know that they can leave the app to go to a website to get more, to engage. Also that they can collect information about those players, like their email addresses. You do now have direct link out buttons to purchase from within apps, within the App Store. And what that means is you can actually, if you're an app developer, you could put a little button in there that says, hey, buy this item, and that link would connect you to a payment transaction outside of the App Store, versus having to use Apple Pay or Apple billing. And then similarly,
so people will have to do that. That will be an option then.
It is an option now. And then
it's out now.
Yeah. So we actually launched a buy button where you can do that within your app, and web shops are the things that you can go out to actually see a whole online store and do more. So it's opening up more and more, and this will be a real big shift once the Google enforcement goes into effect.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to bring up what you guys actually do.
So we do all the things that a game company would need to basically conduct a direct-to-consumer business. And that includes things like we have a payments API that aggregates over 1,000 different payment methods from all over the world. So you have maximum payment coverage. We have a whole host of technologies to support going direct to consumer, like in-game stores, website builders, player identity systems, login systems, player inventory, on and on. And then we also have a number of other products that we have one called Partner Network that allows you to work with influencers at scale, where it's kind of it's a platform where you have developers on one side, influencers on the other. Campaigns are posted on the platform, and people can pick and choose what to engage with, and then attribution happens automatic. Well, we take care of all of that and the payouts and everything. We have marketing technologies like our offer wall that allow you to basically put offers out there to either acquire new users, like, hey, download this app and get a reward, or to perform quests and actions within a game to get more, to help with engagement and retention, and you get special offers for that. So basically everything you need. And then behind all of that, we work as your merchant of record, and that means that we're able to handle all that back office paperwork. So taxes, VAT, digital compliance, KYC, which is know your customer, doing things like payouts, doing things like making sure that you're compliant with whatever privacy rules are going on, customer support, chargeback disputes, all the boring back office stuff. So we do all of these things so that our partners can just focus on making great games.
That's awesome. You remind me of like a Stripe with like a Launch Darkly type deal. Like you got feature management type stuff, being able to do, you got billing. That's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a great business, and we love it, and we work globally, and it means that I still get to hang out with really cool game developers. So I'm happy about that.
That's what you enjoy doing?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I'm still a gamer myself. So
you get all the behind the scenes Easter egg knowledge.
For sure.
Yeah. EA got acquired, $58 billion. That's wild, man.
Wow. That is wild. It really is. It reminds me of early on in my career, I worked with somebody who had been, I believe he was employee number 3 at EA. This is a long time ago. And he had gotten fed up and sort of rage quit, and forever regretted the stock that was lost. So I'm sure this news was particularly painful. But no, EA got acquired by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, the pension fund, I believe it was. And as you mentioned, $58 billion, which is just amazing. And I think it's an interesting time for these big game publishers. We saw Activision get acquired by Microsoft, and we've seen other game companies get acquired as the industry consolidates at the top. But this one is a little bit different. Having the fact it's a sovereign wealth fund is pretty unique.
Do you think they're going to buy and hold, or do you think they're going to make changes? What did Microsoft do with Activision? So
Microsoft. It's not a laughing matter. It's kind of a sad thing, honestly. But they chopped it up to some degree, where they acquire. Look, this is what happens when you consolidate and you go bigger and bigger. The balance sheet, the initiatives on the balance that move the needle on the balance sheet, become bigger and bigger ticket items. And I think what happened with Activision. Well, and I think there were a number of studios that were closed. There were a lot of layoffs. And I believe that was partially due to the fact that once they were part of Microsoft, your game needed to be $1 billion a year game just to move the needle, right, on the balance sheet. And if your game's making 100 million, even if it's profitable, what's 10 million or 20 million in profit, right, versus the opportunity cost or the distraction for a company like that. So, kind of the consolidation leads to fewer bigger titles. And love it or hate it, that's just, that's business, right? That's a natural part of business. So I think that's what has happened there. Also, just we saw with Call of Duty, it was available day one on Game Pass, which is Microsoft's subscription service. There's some arguments that may have actually hurt the overall sales of the game, even though plenty of people were playing it, but they were playing it off a subscription, which was maybe, I'm going to use round numbers here, call it $20 a month versus buying a $60 or $80 copy of the game. So there were some economic impacts. You could argue that those were okay for a company like Microsoft because you were getting more consistent subscription revenue or users that were engaged, whatever. But it did shift the business model. So that's kind of what has happened over at Activision.
I mean, they're not stupid. They got a lot of money and they got a lot of smart people over there. They probably saw they did the math. They did the math and they were like, this is the right move, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, you think they're just going to hold? It's just an asset in the group and they're not going to really tinker with it?
Yeah, I do actually, Joel. I do think they're going to hold everything that I've heard. And I've been over to Saudi Arabia a few times and great. It really, I was impressed actually. Riyadh and the whole country really is evolving pretty rapidly, which is a whole separate conversation. But from my interactions with folks over there, they very much do take a sort of an acquire and hold approach. And it is these acquisitions, I think, are they're obviously financial, they're obviously pedigree. There is a desire to be the best and to acquire and work with the best, but there's also strategic elements here. And there's the one piece of it is Saudi Arabia, as many countries who have a single sort of product economy, in this case oil, they're looking to diversify and set their economies up for the future. And they have identified technology and video games as a market segment that, could grow into something that could be meaningful for, their country from an employment and revenue standpoint. So, there is a desire to build a sustainable business, to get companies that are top tier companies that have talent and knowledge that can help build up the homegrown talent. So I think there's a lot that goes on there. But there's also with EA, Electronic Arts, there's the whole esports and sports part of it. And Saudi Arabia has been very active in both esports. They are the only country that I know of in the world that has a government-led initiative and mandate around esports. And they've acquired some esports companies. They have a huge esports World Cup event there every year. And I think esports Olympics are going to be there. So there's a lot on that front, but then also regular sports. They've been very big when it comes to, F1 and soccer or football, golf, right? Other sports. And EA is a company that is big both in esports and regular sports with games like Apex Legends on the esports side, EA football, which used to be FIFA, Madden, all of that are big sports games. So I think all of this affords an opportunity for this to be strategic and leverage these things to help other parts of their initiatives for growing their economy beyond just hey, let's grab an asset and get dividends, right?
Apex Legends, that's your game of choice.
That is my game of choice.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
I had to work it in there. Yep.
You gotta get it in there. I think that's smart though, because they're single product economy, essentially. It's oil. But I'm pretty invested in nuclear. I think we're talking time scales that are like grandchildren type deal right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not in the short term, in the next 5 years, that oil is not going to be needed. But I do think if you look at things on the 50 to 100 to 200 year scale, which when you're a sovereign wealth fund with trillions of dollars, that is how you think. You do think multi-generationally when you're executing strategy and getting involved in other types of energy and making interesting investments that you're passionate about. That's a very smart move. Better than just keeping it all as cash, which just rots, Exactly. Those Americans over there just printing, just devaluing those dollars.
Yeah, people are still buying the treasury bonds, but we'll see how that goes.
Bitcoin will save us all.
That's the hope.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's plug that Business of Games podcast one more time. That's just the title. People can type that into Spotify and your beautiful face will come up and they can hear all about what you guys are doing in the space.
Absolutely. So the Business of Games, myself and my co-host Leah Ballantyne, yes. So just type it into Spotify or type it in online and you'll find us.
Awesome. Got a hypothetical question for you. Let's say you're driving down the road and you're at a stoplight and pulls up next to you Elon Musk. He rolls down his window. He says, "Hey, Chris, I want to show you something at the rocket factory." You go to the rocket factory. He's got a time machine. This time machine will take you back to your last day of high school where you can give yourself one piece of advice in 10 seconds. What would it be?
Buy Bitcoin.
It can't be buy Bitcoin. All right. I'll accept that answer. That's some good advice.
No, I mean, if I had to give myself one piece of advice, it honestly, it would be, as good as things are now, Joel, and I'm very fortunate and I've had a great career. I think, it would be to have, taken the career a little bit more seriously, or in the early days. And, I had a lot of fun when I was younger and, burned the candle at both ends. So I think, I've seen some other peers who kind of, took things a little more seriously, and I was a little late to that party, which is fine. It served me well and it's made me who I am. But I think, I took that for granted that, some of the grind, it's kind of like your 401k or a long-term investment with compounding interest. The grind that you do or don't do in your early 20s or through your 20s can pay off, right, long term. So that would be generally kind of, I think, the advice I'd give myself.
When did you really start to shape up?
Oh my goodness. All right. So I really started to shape up when I moved over to Activision. And there was a real decision point there where I was working at a game company in Maryland, and I had an offer from this company called Activision, which was only about 100 people at the time. I also DJ'd at night, as many people do that. But I had an offer from a pretty big club down in DC, and to go in and be their house DJ. And I had these two offers in my hand. I said, okay, which way do I go? And to this day, I have no idea why the thought of this. I was like, the DJ thing is fun. I love it. But I think this video game thing is probably more of a career, and the DJ thing probably isn't really a career. And, so I went that path, and that's where I really started to take things seriously and worked with amazing people in the early days, and over 13 years at Activision, which really was foundational in forming who I am and got me on my career path.
You've got some good discernment there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. For a 25-year-old, I don't know how you make that decision, but thank God I did.
I don't know, dude. Yeah. I've screwed up so much. And honestly, I do get moments where I kind of like look back and I'm like, I should have done this a little bit differently, but I've gotten pretty good at recognizing when I'm in that pattern and just being like, stop it, dude. Go back to the gratitude strategy, look at what you do have, and be grateful for that. And that will reset me pretty quick. Yeah,
exactly. And that is the right way to look at it, because, we can't change the past, and the past has made us who we are today. And it's it's up to us to, how we choose to work with that. And, there's always opportunity.
Well, Chris, we made a podcast. How do you feel?
I feel great, Joel. I always appreciate talking with you. You've got great energy, and I love the opportunity to come on. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.